Okay, so let's do a little practice and then we're gonna start the next. So in person.address, what I want you to do is, can you give me all um, all the addresses where address ID is greater than 50? Okay, so the address ID has to be greater than 50. Okay, and also I need only those address where city has or sorry, where state province ID is less than 50. What would you do? So both the condition has to be true. What do you do to this query? Anyone? What do I do in here? Instead of getting all the records, I want these conditions satisfied, then only I should be getting the data. What should I do? Okay. 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 Mm-hmm. Yes. No, you're going right. You're doing right. Just keep going. Okay. Okay. Greater than? Okay. Okay. Oh, same sign. Okay. All right. So do anyone think this query need any change, or this query should work fine? Or do you think do I need to make any changes to the query logic, or the query is wrong? Anything? Anyone has an input about what should I do, or should I just run it? Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Oh, no. I need all the columns. All the columns is fine. I just need these two conditions to be true. Yeah, I got it what you're saying, but I just need only these two conditions to be true, but I want to see everything. Yep, but you're going, if I have to see only two columns, then I have to remove the asterisk and put the two column name. But do you think I need to have a equal to in here, or no? No. Yeah, right. I don't want 50 to be included. Right. Oh, okay. That's okay. Yep, that's okay. That's fine. But I just need address ID greater than 50. So I say where address ID greater than 50 and state province ID less than 50. And you need to have the and condition in here because I want both the condition to be true. So if I run the query now, I will be getting only those addresses where both the conditions are true. Perfect. So good going. Now I will tell you one more concept today, the new one. So let's say, so in the last class, what we have seen was how can you apply the comparison operators, right? We were talking about the comparison operators. We talked about and, or, how you use the parentheses. So when you're using and or both in your select query and you don't put the parentheses at the right place, the query can make totally different result, you know? So you have to be very careful when you're using and or how you're going to put your parentheses around. Okay, now in here, let's say I want to select only few columns this time. Okay, I say address ID, and I say I want another thing is city. Okay, yeah, or state province ID. Let's say I need couple of columns. Okay, so I put those columns in, but let's say this is my report. I want to give it to someone. Okay, whatever the result I get, I need to give it to someone. But before even giving it to someone, I want to change this column. I want to change address ID to address number or any meaningful name. So sometimes what happens is when you go in the company and they have the column names, it doesn't make much more sense. And what you want is you want little descriptive. You know, you want it little meaningful. So you want to change the name that's showing up in here in the header. So what you can do is in SQL, you can alias those columns. Alias means you change the name of the column that's showing up. It doesn't change in the database. It's just for the display purpose. So let's say for the address ID, I want to display this column as a different name called address number. Okay. I'm just saying you can rename any of the columns. So let's say you want to call it address number, you would say as address number. Okay. And for the state province ID, you just want to call it state province. Oops. Okay. So you say state province and then hash if you want state province number. Okay. So now what's going to happen is you have to put as when you alias the column name. So you say select column name as and then the column name that you want to give. And the same thing for the state province ID. If you want to change, you say as and then you change the state province number. Now if you don't want to change, you use as is. Okay, so for the city, if I don't want to change, I keep as is. So now if I run my query, it shows address number and state province number. But let's say in here, if you need the space between address number and the state province, if you try to do that, it's going to give an error. So what you did is you put the space in between. Now you run your query, it's not going to work. Okay, so if you have any space between your name, even a single space, you have to put in the square brackets. Okay, square braces. All right, so if you do this, it will allow you to put space in between. So now I can have space between state, province and number. All right, so you put always in the square bracket if you want the space. I mean, even if you don't need the space, you can put it in the square parentheses. It doesn't hurt anything. But if you have the space, then it becomes mandatory. Okay, so even though I don't have space, it's fine to put it in the square bracket. So what's the good practice in here? Whenever you alias, always use the square bracket to put the name of the column. So you don't need to worry about the space if you have in between. Okay, so the good practice is always use square bracket. Okay, square bracket for aliasing. Okay, when you alias the column, you always use square bracket, no matter if you have space or not. So you don't need to worry about when to put and when not to put. Okay, all right, so this is called aliasing the column name. It doesn't change. Can you hold on for a minute? Just a moment. Hello. Hey Sarah. So let's say, so what I was saying is if you have to alias, you're gonna put the alias in the square bracket. Okay, so this just change the column name. All right, so that's what is for the aliasing. It doesn't change actually the column on the table. Okay, so the column on the table is still the address ID. This is just for the display purpose. Okay, so don't get confused. If I'm seeing the address number, it will be now called address number in my database. No, in the database, the column is still called address ID. So this is just for alias the column as a new column name for the display purpose. Okay, all right, so you understood what the alias is for naming the column as a different, calling out it as a different name. That's it. So now today, usually we're going to use this when we're going to do the calculated column. Okay, so let's say when you do addition of two fields, you alias that column as something else, you know, like you give a meaningful name to that column. That time it will be helpful. So we're going to see how to use the aliasing properly, but just to introduce the concept. So today we want to start with the arithmetic operators. Okay, so in the last class what we have seen was we have seen the comparison operators. The next thing in the SQL is arithmetic operators. You know arithmetic operators, what are those? Addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, percent sign. Okay, so we're going to see how you can use those in the SQL. So let's look at this table. In if you go in the if you expand the table, and in production you're going to see production transaction history. Okay, production transaction history. So the name suggests whatever the transaction company had with the production related are all stored in the production.transaction history. Okay, so it might be related to what either they are getting as an inventory or what they are selling out, we don't know, but whatever is the transaction, it's okay. We don't need to get into the detail about what kind of transaction it is, whether it's an incoming transaction or outgoing, it's okay. But all we are interested in the table because we're trying to do some derived columns, okay, or a calculated column. Now what those are is when you add two different existing column on your table to get a third new column, that would be a derived column. So let's say on your production history, how many columns you have? You have all these columns from transaction ID to modified date. Okay, but let's say you want one more column in here, that would be the multiplication of actual cost into quantity, which will be the total cost. Okay, do you have the total cost in here on the table? For each transaction, do you have total cost? No. So what you want is for each transaction, you want the total cost. So let's say like 4 quantities purchased at this price. How much is the total for this transaction? You know, so there is no transaction total in here. So in order to get the transaction total, what you can do is you can multiply these columns together, and that will give you the transaction total, right? So the quantity multiplied by actual cost will be a derived column. Okay, what it would be? It would be a derived column. So derived column I say is because it doesn't get stored into the table. So if you whatever you do in the select, it's only for display. Nothing gets changed into the table. So let's say when you are showing all the columns and you're doing the calculation, it's just for that particular time. If you go in the table, you're not going to find this calculation. Okay, so that's why it's called as a derived column, because it's deriving from your existing column, and it's computed column as well. It's called as computed because it doesn't exist in your table. Okay, so the derived columns or the computed columns are usually useful when you want a new column based on your existing column. Okay, so for derived column, all I need to do is everything what you have. Okay, so let's say you have select star from production.transaction history. Okay, so all you do is to get the third column, you use 2 actual columns that you want to calculate. Okay, either you do multiplication, addition, it doesn't matter. So what we do in here is, because I want to get the total cost, I have to multiply these 2 columns. So I say actual cost times quantity. That will give me a third another column, which is a total cost. Okay, so I have total cost for each of them, for each of the rows. Okay, you multiply 2 by this, you will get the total cost. Okay, so for each of the transaction you are getting the total cost. So you're using the arithmetic operator in order to derive a column. So you're doing 2 columns multiplication. Now do you see on the top the name of the column is no column name? Now what would you do to make this column name some meaningful name? What would you do in here to make it meaningful? As there is no column name in here, what would you do? So that if third person or someone who don't see the query, if he see the data, he should understand what this column is. What would you do to make this column name meaningful? Anyone guess? Any guess? Yep, so what you can do is you can name, this is your no column name, right? Because this what you're multiplying is a no column. So here you can say as total. Perfect. All right, and then put it in the square brackets. Okay, so now what you did is, because this column was getting no column name, you say show me as total. Why did you didn't get any column name? Because this is a derived column and SQL doesn't know whether should I give actual cost or quantity. You know, it's confusion. So that's why it just doesn't put any name. It asks the user to put it if they want. So now it shows up as total. So you have to basically alias that column. Okay. All right. Now let's say what do you want is you want this column. I mean, you want this column, but you need only the transaction those are greater than 0. What would you do? You don't want to see if the transaction is 0. What would you do? You want to see the transaction where some cost is there. What would you do? I don't want to see any transaction where cost is 0. So what would I use? No, so where, okay, where, oops, total is greater than 0. Let's run this query, see what happens. You don't get anything. What's going on? So you need to think about this. Look at this, hold on. Okay, so do you have in where condition you can include only those columns that exist on the table? Do you have a total column on your table? So the column that you have on the table is only this, right? So what would you do? Instead of total, where does the total comes from? Yeah, so you're going to use, because it's a derived column, so you have to use these two columns in the where condition. You cannot just use the one column, okay? I mean, you cannot just say the total because SQL doesn't allow, because that column doesn't exist on the table. So when you say where condition, the column has to be in the table. So now if I do it, I will get it. I'm getting only those rows where total is greater than 0. Okay, make sense? Can anyone think about anything else? Any other idea? So let's say, I mean, there could be different ways, you know, it's just, this is correct, I'm not saying, but also you can do is where actual cost is greater than 0. Okay, so that would be not complete solution. If you say, okay, can I do actual cost greater than 0? Yes, but how about if the quantity is 0 on the transaction? Like actual cost is 0, what if the quantity is 0? So you have to say actual cost has to be greater than 0 and quantity has to be greater than 0. Okay, so when you do this, then you will get the correct answer like you are getting for multiplication of these two. So either do multiplication of these two or do this thing this way. Okay, it's the same thing. You cannot put the or in here. Okay, you cannot put the or. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, all right, so you have to put the and, so both of them has to be greater than 0. Either of them is greater than 0, multiplication will become 0, right? Okay, all right. So did you understood how you can use the multiplication operator, arithmetic operator, to get a derived column that you need on the table? Okay, so moving on to next is, let's say I have the transaction same table, okay, and now I'm trying to do is I'm trying to derive just not one column. I need a couple of columns. So the column that we derived right now is the total cost. Okay, so select star the column that we have derived, and then I have this from thing. Now what I need is I need more columns. I need to calculate the tax amount on each of the transaction, and let's say on all the sales that I make, I will be charged 8% tax. What would you do? You need to do is, let's take this out. Okay, so what would you do? If you have to get one more column in here where you need the tax amount, okay, right? Oops, what's going on? Where you need the tax amount in here, and tax is 8% of this total cost. What would you do? You just need to write a mathematical expression which can get you 8% of this total cost, right? So how can you get the 8% of the total cost? Anyone? How do you find out the 8%? Yeah, right. So all you're gonna do is you're gonna say actual cost times quantity times 8 divided by 100, right? So all you're gonna do is this thing, the second expression, the second column that I have. So you say, we get rid of this one for now. So you say actual cost times quantity times 8 divided by 100. So basically you're calculating the 8% of it. So you're using multiplication, you're using division as well. Okay, so you're having multiply these two and then multiply it by 8 and divide by 100. Okay, so I have this new column added, which is my tax amount on my each transaction. I run the query, I get no column name. So I have to make sure I put the alias for this column. So I do alias as tax amount. Okay, so do you see something? What did I do? If I don't need to make the query run, I put the double hyphen. It will put the syntax as comment. Okay, so anything if you have to comment in your query window, you always use double hyphen. So that is not considered as a code, and you will not get an error if you have a double quote. So let's say if I move this thing out, double hyphen, and if I run the query now, I will be getting an error. Okay, see, I get an error because BDMS, whatever my comment was, it has nothing to do with the SQL. So I put double hyphen, and now if I even include in my query, I don't get an error. Okay, so anything if you don't like in your query, if you want to put little comments, you can always use double hyphen. Okay, all right, so I do include this as now my tax amount as my column name, alias name, and it will appear in my query. Okay, all right, so any of the calculation you have to do, you should be if you would be able to write the mathematical expression for it, you should be able to do it. Now how about if I have to calculate the sum of these two columns? What would you do? If you have to calculate the sum of these two, what is my total amount after tax? What would you do? You have to sum these two columns up, but can you sum up total cost and the tax amount? No, you cannot sum up because both are the derived column. So what you have to do is you have to take the first expression, then you have to say addition, and then you have to say whatever the 8%. So you do this way. Okay, so this is your first column, this is your second derived column, and you add those two together, which will give you total after tax. Okay, so all I'm right now showing you is how to do a mathematical expression for any of the calculation that you want to do, right? Okay, so if I do this now, I include the column, which is my third column, it's calculation on my existing table. I get total cost, I get tax amount, and I get total after tax. Okay, is it clear? Yes. Yep. You cannot do it because, yeah, if you try to do total cost and plus tax amount, do you have those two columns on your table? You don't have those two columns on your table. All is these two columns are derived column. Does it exist on your actual table? No. So because the column that you add up, it has to come from your table. If it exists in your table, then you can add it. But if it doesn't exist on the table, then you have to write this expression because the total cost it doesn't exist. So that's why I cannot do it. If you had these two columns on your table, you can surely do it. Okay, so if you have those any two columns like this, you can always add it up. Okay, so any column that you see in production.transaction history, that you can add those two columns together. Okay, so you can add any two columns together in here. All right, okay, so that's about, yeah, go ahead. Yes, right, because the tax amount doesn't exist. So you cannot add actual cost into the tax amount because the tax amount is the column I don't have. So you cannot use any of the columns that, yeah, right, even though it's in here, right, you cannot use it. It has to come from the table. It cannot come from your query. Let's say if we're gonna see how can you do it from the outer query, but within the same query you cannot use it. So if you have to use these two columns, you have to create an outer query and then you can add these two columns up, but not now. Within the same query, you cannot refer that column back. So it's the same concept what we introduced here, like you cannot use the total in the where condition. So the same way, you cannot use the total when you're trying to add up two columns. Okay, so either this column cannot, the column that you have derived, it cannot be used in where, it cannot be used in select to add on the other column. Okay, so you have to have, yeah. Yes, yes. So do you remember your high school mathematical expression solving thing, which follows the rule called BDMS, right? So that's the same thing I have in here. That's what I was going to next. So do you remember in AND and OR we were careful about the brackets? The same thing in here, when you are solving the mathematical expression, you should be always following this BODMAS rule. So first you solve the brackets, whatever inside the brackets would be get solved first, and then you do the division. So let's say you do this solve first and then you come out of the bracket, then you do multiply and then do division. You cannot do other way, you know. So if you don't put the things, if you don't put the brackets, then it might be confusing for you might not get the correct result basically. So it might do something, you know, it might like do add these two things together and then do the multiplication and then do the multiplication again and then do the multiplication and then divide, which you don't want. So that's why you need to have proper brackets. What do you want to multiply and then what do you want to do next? Okay, yep, good pick, that's correct. So you always, the SQL will know now if you have the parentheses around, okay, this is I have to solve first. Once I solve this, then I can multiply, then I can divide. So it's gonna follow bracket, then division, then multiplication, then addition, and then subtraction. Okay, yep. So this will be in the round bracket when you apply the parentheses in the expression, and then the square bracket is for aliasing. Okay, so there is a difference between the square bracket and the round bracket. Okay. Which one? Oh, this one? Oh, so that's what I was saying. Do you remember, it's a good practice to put the bracket around. If you don't put the bracket, it's fine. But if you have the space, then you have to force to put it, you know, then you have to put it. You remember when we see the, when we look at the alias, you can put without it, but if you have a space, it forces you to put this square bracket around it. So it's always a good practice to do the square bracket around the column. Okay, yep. All right, so now let's see. So these are the columns. What are these columns? So if you see in the transaction history table, those are basically the integer columns that I'm using to do addition and subtraction. So look at the data type. The actual cost data type is integer, which is int. The actual cost is money, and then the quantity is integer. If this column is defined as a character, you cannot do this expression. Okay, so the column on which you are applying addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, it has to be in either of these data type, either integer, money. They have to they cannot be a character data type. So you cannot do addition for a column, something which is said as character. Okay, so let's say if the quantity is a character, it won't allow you to do the calculation. Okay, so whenever you do the addition, subtraction, multiplication, it has to be the integer or the money data type. Okay, All right. So what happens when you try to do addition between the transaction type or the column that are character? What would happen? If the data type for the column is character, what would happen? It's gonna concatenate the two columns together. Can you think about when you would need the concatenation of two columns? So let's say if I have a table name called, let's do this. So I take this out. Now I'm going to a new table called person.contact. Okay, so let's look at the table, what the data is. In person.contact, I have the data about each of the contact. What is the contact ID? What's their name? What's their email address? What's their phone number? What's their password for the contact? And all other information I have in here. Okay, about this contact. The contact ID 1, 2, 3. Now, let's say, let me go back in person.contact table. Okay, so in here, let's say if I perform, what I want is, I want the first name and the last name to be combined together, and I want to call it as a full name. Okay, what can you do? So what are the data types for these two column name? The first name and the last name. The data type for these two columns are character. The first name is character and the last name is also character. Okay, right? So if I have to put this two column first name comma last name or last name comma first name, what you need to do is you need to do an addition between these two columns that would create a concatenation. Okay, it's called as a concatenation. So what I'm going to do is, if I have to do concatenate, let's say I want to see all the columns and I want to see the full name that I'm going to create. So I say select first name, I want to add it to the last name. Okay, and say as full name. So I'm aliasing that column. So let's remove the alias so there won't be any confusion. So I remove everything. I just have select first name and then add last name. What it would do? It would do concatenate two columns together from the person.contact. So you see my first name and last name got concatenated in just one column. Okay, so what I need to do, I need to say this column as, so I get a column name. So I alias this column as a full name, and then I say I want to see all the columns in my table. So I put comma and then I put the star. Can someone mute? I don't know, but that would be good. Thank you. So what I do is I put comma and then I say from person.contact. So I run the query. I'm seeing the full name for my column which I concatenated, and then I'm seeing all the other columns, right? So my this is my derived column. This time I did the addition on the character, which doesn't do the addition, but it concatenates. Okay. Does it make sense what concatenation is? So if you have character columns and you do add those two columns, it's gonna just concatenate these columns. All right. But do you see there is some problem in the full name? What's the problem with the full name? There is no space. Yeah, you don't know where the full first name starts, where the last name starts. You don't know. You know, I mean, there's no. So what you need to do is either you need to insert space in between or you need to put a comma in between, right? Either of these two. So if you have to introduce a new character, what you have to do is you say, okay, I want in the first name, I want to add a data value. And where does the data value comes? The data value is always in the single quotes, right? So you're introducing a data value in between first and last name. So you introduce the single quotes because you're introducing a data value, right? So you do add in between and you say, okay, in between the first name and last name, I want to add a data value, which is a space. So in the single quotes, you put a space. Okay. Makes sense? All right, so if I run the query now, I will be getting the space in first name and last name. Okay, all right. If I have to put the comma, I can take the space out and I can just put the comma. So any value that you introduce between the two name, you would put in the single quotes. So you have to say, I want to concatenate this, and with the whole thing, I also want to concatenate the last name. So now you are concatenating three things in order to get a full name. First name, then a comma, and then a last name. Where? You have what you're saying? Say one more time. No. Oh, no, that's for when you have the space in between on the header. You want to introduce a space in between in the data value. Okay. So, yep. Here I'm trying to add the two columns and I want to introduce a space in between. And that was the alias. Okay. So here if I have a full name and if I want the full name to have a space in between, then I have to have the parentheses around it, and then only I can put the space. But with this one, I cannot just do like this. I cannot do like this, what you're saying. Think about this. It's okay. It's a good question. I cannot do like this. Because if I do like this, it's not anymore a column on the table. It's saying that you're aliasing something. Okay. So it becomes a column name. Do you have this column name on your table? No. Right? So this will be considered as a column name on your table, which is not there. Okay. All right. So let's say if you have an actual column name on the table, which has a space in between, then you have to have something like this. Let me do this for just now. Let's see if I can do it. What I'm going to do is in the name, I'm going to introduce a space. Okay. I introduce a space between first name and last name. All right. So let's do this. Okay. Get rid of it. Hold on. Okay. Now, if I try to run the query, I'm getting an error. Do I have the first name on the table? No. What I have on the table is first name space last name. So if I run the query now, I will be getting an error. Why? Because I have the column name which has a space, so I have to have that in the parentheses. Okay, so it's about the name, header name. It's not about adding a space in between the data values. Okay, so if I run this query now, it should be running. Does it make sense? So the square bracket comes in picture when you have your header name space. Header name has a space, header or a column name. Okay. All right. So let me put it back. Let me remove the space. Okay. All right. So now what I was saying is, what you want is you want the space in between the data value. When you concatenate, you want to introduce a space. So you say add single quote and you put the space and then you say last name. Okay. So that would give you the space in each of them. All right. Okay. Now let's see the next thing. What I want to do is I have the middle name in here. Am I missing the middle name in my query? Right. So if you have the full name, it should contain the middle name as well. Right or wrong? Right. It should contain the, if you say the full name, it should have the middle name as well. So what I do is I do say first name concatenate with the space in between, and then concatenate the middle name, then concatenate the space again, and then concatenate the last name, and then say it as a full name. This expression is more correct than before, right? Because I'm using the middle name as well. So if a person has a middle name in the full name, it's not here. So that's not the correct full name. So this is my correct full name. But let's see what happens when I put the middle name in here. See, my full name is null. What's going on in here? When I did add a middle name in here, I'm getting some null values. What's this null is? So think about in the SQL, that's the new concept I'm introducing, is the blank and the null. In the SQL, the blank is totally different than null. Okay, so what is null in the SQL? This value, do you see in the middle name I have some nulls in here? What does it mean? So the null means they don't have the middle name, so the values never get inserted in the middle name, right? So let's say if you're asking a person what's your first name, middle name and the last name, if the person doesn't enter middle name, it will be null. It means that value is not present for the middle name. Okay, so null means not applicable or not available kind of thing. But in the SQL, if you add anything with the null, it becomes null. So it's similar to when you multiply anything by 0, it becomes 0. If you add anything with the null, it becomes null. Okay, so do you understand what's happening in here? When I'm adding a middle name to the first name and last name, because it's a null, the whole name would become null. But if there is a value, it's fine. If there is a null, it becomes null. Why? Because if you add null to anything, it becomes null. That's the SQL Server thing. So you have to be very careful from now. This is called handling the null in the databases. Okay, what it's called? It says it's called as handling the null values in the database. It's very important to understand this concept. How do you handle the null in the database? Okay, because if you don't handle the null properly, you're gonna have these kind of situations where the full name will show up as null. Okay, we're gonna see more cases when we move forward. We'll see what issues null can cause in the data. I mean, you cannot avoid the null. You cannot say that, you know, Andy, can I put the null, can I remove the null from the database? No. If you don't have anything, it becomes the null automatically. So this is why it's called as handling the null values in the database. Okay, because you have to handle it carefully. All right, so this is the first case. Go. Yes, yes. Yes, right. So anything you add it to null becomes null. Very similar concept. Anything you multiply with the 0 becomes 0. Okay, so now how do I handle the null? I just called you. This is called handling of the null. Am I handling the null in here? No, I'm not handling. If I would be handling, it should give me the name and should skip the middle name, right? So now how do I handle null? So to handle the null in the SQL, what you do is you use a function. Okay, so don't worry much about the function, just see how do you use it. Okay, so what do you say is, all you do is, so did you understood this thing, right? Is it clear? This thing, when I introduce the middle name. Okay, in between. Is this query clear to everyone? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to handle the null in my database. Okay, handling the null. So in the middle name, I'm going to check, is my middle name null? If it's null, replace it with the blank. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to say check if the value is null for the middle name, replace it with blank. So in order to handle the null, you have to use this function called isNull. Okay, so you apply isNull on the middle name, and then you say if middle name is null, then replace it with the blank and close the bracket. So whenever the null is found for the middle name, it would be replaced with the blank. So the blank is different than null. Blank means there is some value, it's not a null. Blank means it's a white space. Okay, so in database, blank is different than null. So what I'm doing is I'm saying that when there is a middle name null, replace it with the blank. Now let's run the same query. So see, what I'm getting in here is now the name, even though I have null in here. So this is called handling of the null values. So even though I had the null, but I'm getting the first name and the last name, and if there is a middle name, I get the middle name as well. Okay, so all you do is you just check for the middle name. If it's null, do it with the blank. Okay, now let's see what is blank. What I did is I added one more column in here between all the columns. I have in the table and the full name, which is called blank. Okay, what I do is I have a new column introduced in between the full name and the blank. Okay, okay, so do you see what did I do is I have the blank. So what blank is basically, it's nothing. It's not as same as null. So this white space is called as a blank value. Okay, all right, is it clear? So the blank, when I introduce, it's different than null. Now can anyone ask me, why do I put only for the middle name? Do we need to handle the first name and the last name? Do anyone think about that? Yes, you have to handle the null for the first name and the last name if there are null values. Now how do you know I apply this to first name or not? Right? Should I apply to first name as well? Because I'm not gonna sit through and see, am I getting null for full name? If not, then I shouldn't apply, and if there is, apply it. So what you can do is always look at this. Go to the table and look for the first name and the last name. What does it say? It says, the first name says it's a not null. Okay, so when it says the data, when it says the first name has not null value, it means you don't need to introduce the is null concept, or you don't need to put the is null. Okay, because what does it say on the database? If the first name is not null, it means you're never gonna have the null value for this column. If the person tries to leave it blank, it won't allow. Okay, so do you need to handle the first name and the last name? No, because both of them are not null. Only value null is allowed for the middle name. So that's the only one you have to handle. All right, questions? Any questions? Yes, you don't need the is null. Exactly. Yep. Because if it says not null, then the null value will not be allowed to be entered. You have to have something if it says not null. Okay, but because it says allow null, that's why you have to handle the null values. Now can you can ask me that why I have can I do this as a not null? You can do it, but what if the person don't has the middle name? You cannot enforce the middle name as a not null, right? Because most of the people might have middle name, might not have it, you know. So that should be optional column. So that's why you have the null values in here. Okay, so very important concept, handling the nulls in the SQL Server. We're gonna see more and more when we're gonna go. Okay, all right. But did you understood the difference between the blank and the null? So this column is blank. It means it's different than null. So if you add anything to blank, it remains whatever the concatenation of these two. Okay, the blank is different. Blank is nothing but, let's say you go in, instead of typing you put 5, 6 space, that's blank. If you don't put anything, it's a null. Okay, all right. So saying that concatenation that can be applied, the concatenation would only apply to the column that has character. Now let's see what happens when you concatenate two dates together. Okay, so we have seen the integer column, we have seen the character column. If you try to add two dates, what will happen? You have a modified date in here. Let's go to a different table, maybe where we have two dates. Okay, so if I go to select star from human resources.employee, in here I have birth date and the hire date. Let's do a concatenation of these two columns and see what happens. You know, this is just you are trying to work around, see what would happen with different types of column. So the data type for these two columns is the date, right? Because it has date in it. So let's do this. Birth date, comma, hire date. Okay, and then you put the comma. So instead in here you add these two columns together and see what happens. So see what happened. When you say the birth date, add the hire date, it basically put these two dates together and give you the summation of these two dates, right? Which doesn't make sense. Okay, so basically what it's doing is it's adding the number of columns month by month and date by date, which doesn't make any sense. So when you are adding two dates together, it's not going to make any sense. Okay, so make sure you add on. When you do, you should be adding either on for the concatenation or for the addition. Okay, all right, so this one doesn't make any sense. Okay, all right, so now let's see, let's try to practice few more things. What I want to do is, let's do sales order detail table. Okay, so this is now your order table. Adventure works when they are getting the sales order, it's in the sales order detail table. Okay, so what I want you to do is, I want you to write a query, everyone. Okay, I want you to write a query to do is, I want to get the let me see. Okay, so you have the unit price, right? And you have the unit price discount. What I want you to do is, I want to have a column which will give me the unit price after discount. What would you do? What would you do in order to get the unit price after discount? For each of the row, I want to see what's my discounted price. What would you do? Okay. If you do a you finish first and then I will ask questions. Yeah, let's change it. So let's say, what we're gonna say, after discount price. Okay, yep. All right, so you're gonna need to subtract, not add, right? You need to subtract those two columns, unit price minus unit price discount. Okay, so if you do this, you're gonna get the unit after discount price, whatever is the discounted price for each of them. Now if you have no discount, you don't want to see the rows. So let's say what you want is, from this table you only want to get those transactions where you given the discount. What would you do? You don't want to see if the discount wasn't given on the transaction. What would you do? I don't want to see the transaction in which transaction I didn't give the discount. I only want to see the discounted transaction. What would you do? So how do you I want transaction, only transaction where I've given discount. Yes, right, unit price. No, not unit price, not unit price. the unit price discount. Yeah, right. Yep. Yep. All right. That's it. So you're gonna say is, okay, I need only those columns where my unit price discount is greater than 0. So it means on this unit price I have given this much discount. So I'm not seeing the transaction where I haven't given the discount. Yep, that's it. So you don't need to do this time on this calculation. You just need to do on unit price discount. Okay. All right. Perfect. So would you be able to do this? What would be my unit price after discount? I want to see only discounted records. We just do this. Okay. Yep. So, and now let's say what you want to do is in here, do you have the order quantity, but let's say you don't have the order quantity on table. For example, you don't have an order quantity. If you have to derive the order quantity, what would you do? If you have to derive it, you have to divide the line total by the unit price, right? Or unit price minus unit price discount would give you the quantity. So that time you would need to do the division, okay, in order to get the order quantity. All right. So the line total, if you divide by unit price, you will get a order number of quantities that you ordered. Okay. So I'm just trying to show you how you're going to use the calculated columns. You just need to know what is the mathematical expression for it. You put that in, and that would be your answer for calculated columns. Okay. Any questions about this? Any questions about mathematical operators? Do anyone have any concern where we'll be using the arithmetic operators or anything? Okay. All right. So the arithmetic operators are very straightforward. All you need to do is know the mathematical expression and make sure, only one thing you need to make sure, you cannot use the derived column in your where or in the select. You always have to use the formula that column is derived from. Okay. All right. So now the next thing that we're going to start is the wildcard. Now what is wildcard? In the human resources.employee, where I say, can I get all the titles which has manager in it? Okay. So what I want is, can you give me all the title which has manager in it? So this one has an engineering manager. This has marketing manager. So I want to see all those employees who has a manager in their title. Okay. So I want to see both of them. I want to see engineering manager. I want to see marketing manager, and I want to see all the employees. I don't know how many title has manager in it. What I want is, give me all the title whose title give me all the employees whose title contains manager. So now if you do this, select star from human resources.employee where title equals to manager, would this work? Would this be a correct query? Anyone? If where title equals to manager. Okay, sorry. Yes, it will give, yes, right. Yep. Let's run the query. It will not give me the design manager. It will not give me the senior, whatever the manager is. So what it's doing is it's not giving me engineering manager. It's not giving me marketing manager. What it does is it looks for if the title exactly matches. It has to exactly match. Okay. In order to get this result. So when you use the equal to, yes, we're gonna go. That's why I'm saying this thing. That's why I'm saying. Yep, we're gonna get into the next like. So when you use equal to, it always compares exact value in the cell or in the data value. If even there is a little difference, you're not gonna get it. Okay, you're not gonna get. So that's why I don't get any of these marketing manager or the engineering manager. Why? Because the title doesn't match with these. It has to exact match. Now what would you do if you have to get these kind of things, if you have to get the title with manager? So you use wildcard operators to search where it not exactly match, but it's similar. Okay, so the wildcard is used to do the similar search. Okay, it doesn't has to be exact, it has to be a similar search. So these are the operators that we're gonna use in the wildcard. And what's the, instead of equal to, we're gonna use like. Okay, so these are the operators we're gonna use, and the like would be instead of equal to. Okay, all right, so let's see the first one. When I'm saying I want to see all the managers, I would say select star from human resources dot employee, and if I just do like in here, it's not gonna work. Where I say select star from human resources dot employee where title like manager, I'm still gonna get the same thing. Okay, so because I'm not using any wildcard operator, using like is same as using equal to. So if I write this query or if I write this query, these both the queries are same. Even though I'm using like, it doesn't make any difference because I'm not using any of the wildcard operators. So the like is useless without using the wildcard operator. Okay, clear? So the like is useless without the wildcard operator. Now let's see, we're gonna see each of these wildcard operators. Did you understood the like is for doing a match, but when you do a match, you have to use the wildcard operator. We're gonna see each of the wildcard operator one by one. So first start with the percent sign. The percent is for string of any length. So any number of characters you have would represent the percent sign. So when you say percent manager, they could have anything in front. When you say percent manager, what does it mean? So you say like and you say percent manager, it means it can have anything in front of it. It can have any number of characters, any number of words, anything. But if it ends with manager, you will get all those titles. Okay, so when you use the percent, it means the first part, the suffix could be anything, but the prefix or the ending word should be manager. Clear? What the percent is? Percent represents string of any length. So in here you can have any alphabet, any character, any number, any length, any number of words, any number of letters, you can have anything. So wherever it ends with manager, you're gonna get all those titles. Okay, but you have to have like in here. So if I do like percent manager, I'm gonna get all those titles which ends with manager. See, I'm getting engineering manager, marketing manager. Why? Because all of these ends with the manager. Okay, clear? So anything that ends with manager, you put the percent sign in front of it, so that anything in front of it would come production control, human resources, information services, finance, any number of words, any length would be covered by percent. So it could be anything in front. Now what if I need to find out, give me all the titles that starts with manager? What would you do? Give me all the title that starts with manager. Put at the end. Perfect. Very good. So I'm gonna put the manager percent in the end, and then I say search. I don't get anything. It means there is no title that starts with manager. Okay, so it's okay. It's just there is no data or there is no title that starts with manager, but you know how to do it. Manager, and then you put the percent. But now if I ask you, can you give me all the title that contains manager? That contains manager, what would you do? Yes, good job. So you're gonna put the percent in the front and in the end as well. So it could start with manager, it could end with manager, or it can have manager in between. So if the manager is there in the title, you will get all those. Okay. So when you put the percent, it doesn't mean that they have to have something in the starting. No. Okay. Even if there is nothing, that's fine. Percent, if you put it in the end, it doesn't mean that they have to have anything at the end. No. Okay. It's just if there is anything, consider that as a string. That's it. Okay. So percent could be nothing as well. So it's not necessarily they have to have anything. Does it make sense? So this will give me the title that starts with manager, the title that ends with manager, and the title that contains manager in between somewhere. Okay. All right. Is it clear? Okay. So now let's do this. If I ask you, can you give me, this is a tricky question, okay? I'm saying you, can you give me all the person's birth date who born in 1964? What would you do? Give me all the employees whose birth date is who born in 1964, let's say. What would you do? Anyone? No, but who, give me all the employees who born in 1964. Okay. Yep, your query is right. Yep, your query is right. But why I asked you, it doesn't work with date. So if you try to run the query, you're not gonna get anything. Right? Why? Because the wildcard doesn't work with the dates. Okay. So even though you know there was a person, no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. It's not gonna work. No matter what you put. The wildcard, it's not made for the dates. You cannot apply the wildcard on the date. The reason behind is because the date could be in any format. When you store in the date, sometimes it's stored as month, day, year, sometimes it's stored as day, month, year, sometimes it's stored as DD, MM, YY only. So that's why the SQL doesn't know what format you are storing the date, and it gets confusing. Okay, so that's why the wildcard is not allowed on the date column. That's why I want you to, have the query and make sure it doesn't run, even if you try to do it. Okay. All right. So you won't be able to apply on the date column. So wildcard has an exception. You cannot apply it on the date, but you can apply it on any other type of column. You can apply on integer column. You can apply it on the float column, decimal, anything, but not on the date column. Okay. All right. Now let's say what I want to do is I want you to find all the employee. I want to find all the records from employee where national ID number has to start with 2. What would you do? What would be your query? The national ID number has to start with 2. National ID number. National ID number. Okay. Yeah. Percentage. Yep. Okay. Perfect. So all you're gonna do is where national ID number like 2%. So it will give me all the employees whose national ID number starts with 2. Yep. Good job. So you can apply it on the any type of, even on the numbers, anything, but not on the date. Okay. Let's do this. Can you tell me what would it do? Okay. If you put the percent in front, you take it out from the back or no? So now what it would do? Think about it. When you put the percent in front, it means the national ID number has to end with 2. That's the difference. So now it's starting with 2. If you put in the front, then it has to end with 2. So you're going to get all the national ID number that ends with 2. What now if I do this? Oops. If I do this, if I put in the start and at the end, what this would make? Okay. So is it in the starting, in the end, or in the middle? Okay. Okay. All right. That's okay. Okay. I hear from the Dan. He says anywhere. And what do you think, Victoria? Mm-hmm. Okay. So yep. So no. So what it can be anywhere. The 2 can, it can start with 2, it can end with 2, or the 2 can be anywhere in between. Why? Because you say the percent sign, it means it can start with anything or nothing. Okay, it can start with, not necessarily they have to have any numbers before that. So it means it can start with 2 as well, and then it can end with 2 as well. The same thing, any numbers after 2, and or it can end with, even the 2 is the last, that's fine, because percent represents any length of string including 0, right? So it can be the in the end, in the start, or in the middle. Sorry? Yeah, sure. So you get this number because it has in the starting, but it has in the middle as well. But you get this one because the 2 is in the middle. You get this one, it's hard to find where you just have. So see this one. This one has only at the end. So you get this because you have percent at the starting. Okay, because you have percent in the starting, that's why you get this. You get this one because you have percent on both the side. That's why you get this one, because it doesn't start with 1, it doesn't end with, sorry, it doesn't start with 2, it doesn't end with 2, but it has 2 in middle. That's why you get it. It ends with 2, that's why you get it, because you have percent before and after. Okay, so when you have percent on the both the side, it means it could be either start with, it could be either end with, or it could be in the between. Okay. All right. Now we just do the contain one. Okay. All right. Let's see. All right. So we just seen. So all right. So the next is, we have seen how to use. We have seen how to use the percent sign, right? Percent represents, it could be any length or no length before this, right? So before whatever you have mentioned in here, if you have anything or nothing, you will get all those which has this in 0 at the end. Okay. All right. So now let's see, what do you want to do is, you want to have how to use the second one, which is under bar or underscore. Okay. So what does the underscore means? The underscore means it represents only single character. The percent represent what? It represents any length of string. but the underscore represent any character. It could be a special character, it could be number, it could be alphabet, but it has to be only single character. Okay, it can be only single character. So let's say when you put the under bar, it means it can take only that place. It cannot be any length. Okay, so let's see how do you use this one. But does it make sense? It's a single character, or it's a single numeric alphabet. It could be either number, it could be either special character, it could be either alphabet. So let's say if I ask you, can you give me all the national ID number which has 2 on the second, the 2 is the second digit, what would you do? So the second digit has to be 2, and then after it could be anything. What would you do? So you cannot use percent now, because I said the second digit has to be 2. So instead of percent, you would put under bar. This means the first digit could be anything, or the first place could be anything. Either it could be a special character, either it could be alphabet, either it could be a number. But the second digit has to be 2. So the first is anything, you put the underscore instead of percent now, and then you say 2, and then you put percent. Why do you put the percent at the end? Because the first digit could be anything, the second is 2, and after it could be anything as well. Okay, so all I'm saying is this national ID number has to have on the second place is 2. So if you run the query, you're gonna get all those numbers in which they have 2 at the second place. Okay, makes sense? So under bar means in here you can have one single character of anything. Okay, now here's my question. Can you give me all the manager ID that has, or let's say, can you give me all the title that has T in the second place? Give me all the title that has second character of T. What would you do? The second character is T. What would you do? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, T then percentage. So same thing, all I did is I just said apply, yep, apply on the title. Okay, now let's say what I do is I tell you the third letter has to be T. What would you do now? The third letter has to be T instead of the second one. Perfect, you put another bar. Yes, yes, it would work. Okay, so you're putting 2 under bar so that it represents only 2 character. You cannot put the percent. Are you clear on this? You cannot put the percent in here because the T can then appear anywhere in the string. No, all you want is only on the third place. That's why you put the 2 under bar. And the under bar could be anything. Either it could be the number, either it could be a special character, or it could be either the alphabet. Okay, all right. Now I ask you is, let's do this. Can you give me, sorry. I think it doesn't matter in here. Maybe let's see. I think it doesn't matter. Let's see. So if I do, let's do the capital. Let's do the capital T in here. I think with the data, it doesn't matter. It does. Oh, it's a case sensitive. Yeah, right. So it doesn't do if you have the capital T because the database is case sensitive, right? Yep, good question. All right, so you can apply the same concept on the national ID number as well. If I ask you, can you give me the third number is 2, then you put 2 underbar and then 2. So is it clear how to use the underbar? Now let's see. Can you give me, here is the query. Can you give me this thing? All right, how about this one? Can you give me a query or from all the employees whose national ID number starts with 7 and has to be a 6-digit number? What would you do? The national ID number has to start with 7 and it has to be a 6-digit number. It cannot be 7-digit number. It cannot be 8-digit. It cannot be 5-digit. It has to be a 6-digit number. What would you do? You don't need the percent anymore. Why do you put the percent? Yeah, you don't need the percent, because if you put the percent, then it could be 6-digit and after it could be anything. It means it could be any length. So there is no point in putting the underbar and then the percent together, because then it makes it of any length, right? Okay, so all you do is 7 and then you put 5 underbar. Perfect. Good job. Okay. All right. Yep. Okay. So now we're gonna come to the next one. On the third is we have, all right, I think we are almost the time, but let's do the third one. At least introduce it. What is the third? The third is the square bracket. Okay. So let's say, what is my limitation right now? My limitation is in here I cannot say with the 7, the second place has to be either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It would be nice if you can say something like that, right? So if you can say that the second digit has to be either 1, 2, 3 and 4. Okay, so after 7 it has to be 1, 2, 3 and 4. Can you do it now? No. There is no way you can say that the second digit has to be either 1, 2, 3, 4. You can either pick one of them. You cannot pick all 4, right? So if I ask you, can you say just it can be either of the 4? You cannot do it, right? So this one defines the range, what can come in this second place, or what can come in the third place, or what can come in the fourth place. So wherever you put this square bracket and you put in between in the square bracket, if you put all those numbers, it can be any of them, but it represents the single digit, like underscore. It only helps you to put the range, or it helps you to put the specific numbers that you're looking for. Okay, so let's say if you put the square bracket and you put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it doesn't mean it represents the 5 digit. It still represents only 1 digit, but that 1 digit could be either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right now it could be anything. It could be either P, T, alphabet, special character or number. But when you put the square bracket, it has to be either of these 5. The second place has to be. Make sense? Okay. Okay. All right. So if it makes sense, can you give me a national ID number that starts with 7 and the second digit has to be either 2 or 8 and has to be a 6-digit number? What would you do? The second digit has to be either 2 or 8. So it could be either 72 or 78. It cannot be other than that. And then it has to be a 6-digit number. You put a 10 and 8 in there. How many underbar you will put? I need the 6-digit number. 5 underbar? 4. Yes. No, 7 to 8. This is still a second digit. So the second digit could be either of these two. The third digit is not defined. The third digit is here. It could be anything. So the second digit has to be either of these two. Victoria. We need 4 underbars. Yes. We need 4. Because your first digit is 7, second digit is either 2 or 8, and then third digit could be anything, fourth could be anything, fifth could be anything, and sixth could be anything. So you have 4 underbars. Okay. All right. So this doesn't represent 2 digits after 7. It represents only 1 digit, and this is just showing that it could be either 2 or 8. Okay. Is it clear, Victoria? Oh, if it's 101, you can have 101 for the single digit. No. Okay, tell me how many digits are there in 101? Yeah, so it's only for a single. So it's only for a single digit. You cannot, if you put 101, it will say 1, 0, and 1. Either it could be 1, 0, or 1. You cannot have 101 on one digit. I mean, do you understand what I'm trying to say? You cannot have 101 on single digit, please. Okay, right. That's okay. Yep. Sometimes sometimes it confuses me too, when you say this, and I was like, I think for a second, and I was like, no, it cannot be true. Yep. But good question. Keep it up, You're gonna ask more, we're gonna get more. But how about now, if I say the second digit could be anything from 2 to 8, what would you do? So the second digit could be from 2. So let's run this query. I mean, it's fine. It's just see 1 underbar, 2 underbar, 3 underbar, 4 underbar. Okay, let's run this query. So there is no national ID number that has 6 digit in it. Okay, so let me put 7, 8, 9. So I do 9 digits now. Oops, I still don't have anything. Maybe there is no 9 digit. Okay, let's try. Yes, thank you. All right. Okay, so I have 1 underbar, 2 underbar, 3, 4, 5, 6 underbar I have. So it's a 8 digit number. Okay, so now what I was saying is I need not 2 or 8. I need 2 from 2 to 8. So it could be the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What would you do? Two, 3, 4. Okay, that's fine. That works for me. 2 to 8. Okay, but how about if you say it could? So let's say if you're working on this title and you say it could be from B to Z. You're not gonna type from B to Z, right? You're not gonna sit and like type 23 alphabets in here, right? B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, right? So what you can do in here is I asked you because you can have the range in here and you can say from 2 to 8. So when you do 2 to 8 and hyphen, you can define the range that will pick you anything from 2 to 8. Okay. Let's say if you say 0 to 8, let's see if we get more, or put in here 0 to 8. So in 0 hyphen 8. So if you do this, it will let you define the range. Okay. All right. Let's do this on the other column. In here I have. So see, what I'm doing is I'm saying it could be the second digit, or the second letter could be between A to R, or it could be between U to Z, and it could be between 4 to 8. So all I'm doing is with the comma, I'm defining the range for each of, because I don't want to say between A to Z. I want to say between A to R, and I'm skipping some alphabets in between, and I'm saying U to Z. And then it can also be a digit as well, if there is any. So you can have the hyphen in between to define the certain range. Okay. All right. So you don't have to type everything in A to R and then U to Z and then 4 to 8. Is it clear? So this one is for the first letter has to be P, and then it could be A to R or U, V, W, X, Y, Z, and then take out 4 to 8. Okay. All right. So try to practice. So I think we are done with the wildcard. Let's do last question before you go. Okay. Or you can do this as an assignment and bring it in the next class. Type the query, work it out, and bring it, I want to find all the employee IDs whose employee ID is so this is an assignment, okay, whose employee ID is between 100 to 200. Okay, so this has to be, or their manager ID is between 1 to 10, and so this has to be true always. This condition has to be true always. So this condition is between 100 to 200, or manager ID could be between 0 to 10, but the title has to follow this thing. Okay, no matter what employee you pick, that their title has to follow this condition. Their first letter has to be P. The second letter has to be either R or S. The third letter could be anything. The fourth letter has to be between A to Z, and then it could be anything after. Okay, so this is the condition for the title. This is the condition for the manager ID. This is the condition for the employee ID on human resources.employee. And this condition has to be true always, no matter what. This condition has to be true always. So when I say always, you are thinking about using the parenthesis correctly, because it's now and or. Okay, I give you the hint. So now we are applying all the concept that we learned in the first class and today. Okay. All right, any questions before we end today? Okay, so if no questions, we can end. And then so like I did previously, I'm gonna send you the practice, I'm gonna send you the query from today, and I'm gonna send you the video, okay, by tomorrow. All right, so I will send you an email with all these information like I did last time. Yeah, sure. You see it on the top, Object Explorer. You go to the view and click on Object Explorer. All right. Okay.